And our next presenter is Cathy McMillan, representing Dyslexia BC. Welcome.
Hi, Cathy. Hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
So were you here to hear the drill? 5 minutes?
Yes.
It'll count down, and then it'll turn red and start counting up. When it starts counting up, that means we're into the second half, which is the question and answer, for a total of 10 minutes.
Okay. Is it okay if I'm recorded? Is that okay? Just me? Or
yeah, you're being recorded anyway.
Yeah, but can I record it myself too? No. Okay, perfect.
No.
No?
Sorry,
Pardon? Yeah.
So our practice is not to allow it to be recorded,
okay.
But we are recording it, and it will be made accessible to you.
Okay, so I will actually hear the words, not a written format?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and you're welcome to take pictures.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay. So I usually start my presentations by saying, hello, my name is Cathy McMillan, and I am dyslexic. You can't tell by looking at me. But certainly every day in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, my mom would go in and say, she's not reading. She has a December birthday. Can you hold her back? We moved provinces. I was born in Ontario. I went to school in BC for kindergarten. I went to Alberta. Same thing. We're moving. Can you fail her? Keep her back. And they would say, she's such a lovely girl. She'll be just fine. So fast forward, take my kids into school. They're so nice. Don't worry. Don't worry. Both my kids are diagnosed with dyslexia. My son in grade 7, he's the oldest. My youngest in grade 1. I have moved her schools 7 times, and I can honestly say there isn't a school in BC that will service a severe dyslexic appropriately. And I can honestly say that dyslexic people in the province of BC do not get equitable access. The number one reason they don't is because the school systems, private, public, do not use the type of reading instruction that they need to get access. And that is called the science of reading. In Ontario, in January or February, was just released the Right to Read inquiry done by the Human Rights Commission in Ontario. It was a 2-year study done by Linda Siegel from UBC and another professor in Halifax, I believe. And they discovered that there isn't a school in Ontario that uses the science of reading. So Ontario is busy responding to this inquiry that had a thick, huge number of recommendations. And they are going to be changing to the science of reading, because right now schools use balanced literacy. Balanced literacy is like expose your kids to reading. In my view, it's the hippie version. Expose your kids. Let them love it. They'll like it. Just keep reading. Keep reading. A dyslexic needs to know how it comes together, how it's formed. They become our engineers. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, dyslexic. Reading is the number one indicator of how well someone will do at school. And if they can't read, how can they go to post-secondary? Our kids are underrepresented in post-secondary, and if they do get there, the only reason they've got there is because they've had parents been able to afford private tutoring and access to materials. So I'm asking for 3 things today. In 2002, the supplemental funding category for dyslexics, learning disabilities is the main broad category. Dyslexia is 80 to 90% of all learning disabilities. The supplemental funding for learning disabilities was taken away in 2002. Right now, within our education system, schools do not get any funding at all to help dyslexic students. 0. Autism gets 19,000. That's a huge difference. A huge difference. The diagnosis is done within the school system. It's done with a budget within a school system. No money is given to the school districts. So they choose to do 2 assessments a year to diagnose dyslexia. Only 2 per school at all. And it's 1 in 5. Dyslexia is 1 in 5. I recommend that we take psychology services and cover them under MSP so that people can get a dyslexia diagnosis, go to the doctor, and it is paid for. I also recommend that you bring back a funded category for dyslexics. And the third thing I recommend is that you make legislation so that dyslexia screening is done in kindergarten for all kids. You lose your chance to remediate by grade 3. It's almost impossible to get them reading by grade 3. You need to get them in kindergarten, early intervention. And also legislation to make sure that they change to the science of reading and get rid of that balanced literacy. Obviously, the funding that is needed will incorporate these 3 asks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Megan, Renee, Henry, Corinne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. As my daughter is dyslexic, I appreciate the advocacy work that you do and agree that often they become the engineers and the creatives. So my daughter's headed down the science path herself. I just wanted to clarify on one of your recommendations. And I'm just curious, will you be putting in a written submission? And secondly, in that, could you now possibly break down the funding? You mentioned sort of wanting to see a funded category in schools, and then also subsequently talk about having the schools legislatively be required to switch to the science of reading. Do you see that being a switch for all students, or do you, if you had a funded category, how do you see the supports being built into that for students that are dyslexic? I was wondering if you could just expand a bit on that, please.
Okay, well, the average student, let me break. Balanced literacy, what they use in schools now, gets about 60% of the kids. Mm-hmm. They should be able to learn with balanced literacy. The other 40 will not learn. If you use structured literacy in the classroom, you should be able to get to 80% of the kids. Those 20% left will be your dyslexic kids, somewhere on the spectrum, anywhere from mild, because it is a spectrum, mild to, I'm probably mild to moderate. My son is mild to moderate, and my daughter is severe. She's in 21, and she still reads at the grade 2 level, but she's on the honor roll at UVic right now with lots of backup. So you get that 80%, which is higher than what you would get for the balanced literacy in the classroom. Then you would need pull out, or you need extra time. The thing with dyslexia, they just need more time and more repetition to actually learn it. And like I said, they need it broken down. Says and they can't just memorize, because memory is not their strong part. Working memory is a problem for dyslexic kids. So that out of the 20% that are left, probably 15% or 10% should get a bit of pull out and they'll be okay. The next 10%, you'll need a remediation room like the Moore case. I don't know if you're aware of the Moore case. He was a dyslexic boy. His remedial center was closed down in North Vancouver, and he had nowhere to get remediated. And that's what severe dyslexics need. They need intense remediation for a number of months or even years. And that could mean like 3 hours a day with reading before, it's going to make a big difference. And again, Moore was going to start that in grade 3. He should have been starting that in kindergarten. We've been we're way behind. In the US, they've been making legislation for the last 5 years about dyslexia, early screening, and the change to structured literacy, because what's lacking in the Right to Read report is the fact that all the school districts and the ministries are all saying they're just recommendations. So without the legislation, it's not the accountability. They need the accountability to make the change and some funding, because the ministry is going to have to change. They're going to have to change their thinking and bring in experts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for your advocacy on this really important topic. My mom is an early literacy specialist who has for a long time advocated the science of reading. So I'm a big fan, and my niece is dyslexic, and my mom has been the primary one to teach her how to read, which is awesome. I am very curious about your testing, mandatory testing for all children coming into the school system. I think that that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of the cost of that? I know
$10 per kid.
Okay.
So $10 per kid as opposed to a $3,000 assessment later on,
Yeah.
right? And what that gives you is a direction of where they need the remediation. So it tests them for phonics, it tests them for fluency, it tests them for all the components. And so if you know it's a breakdown in their fluency, then you work on the fluency. If it's the phonics, you break down the phonics. I'm a scientist. It's simple. For me, you don't expose somebody. You don't just go, oh, I hope it goes away. It's not going to go away. You have to figure out what's wrong, and it's a diagnosable thing that we can remediate quite easily if they're caught early.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, sadly, Paula, we're out of time.
Okay.
But part of the reason we're out of time is because the committee has been so engaged and interested in what you've presented.
Okay, thanks.
And so thank you for that. Thank you for your advocacy. I guess one of the thoughts that I'm left with listening is that if I understood you correctly, people with dyslexia have a unique set of skills and a unique way of thinking that the world needs. And it wouldn't take much to actually open that up to us.
That's correct.
So,
That's
okay.
correct.
Thank you so much.
Let me just say one thing. In true dyslexic fashion, I didn't read the instructions, and I made a wonderful presentation, which I posted on Twitter. So if you want to see my entire and learn a little bit more about dyslexia, just go to my Twitter page.
Will do. Okay.
Kathy,
Thank you so
Your
much.
Twitter page is very useful. It's got lots of good information on it. So
Thank you. And I'll send all of you Dyslexia BC mugs.
Okay.
Expect that in the mail. Thank you.
Twitter page.
And